Ciao, Trevor.
Ciao, Lani. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. It's unfortunate that this time we're back. You're across the pond again.
Yeah, I'm really sorry I couldn't make it to Italy. How's everyone at the company?
All's going well here. We're doing okay. So far, so good.
Excellent. Well, hello, everyone. Today is the first of a two-part series where we're concentrating today on championship pools. We're talking about the new FINA regulations and the changes to design and the constructability of pools. And tomorrow, we'll be talking to people who are trying to build, let's say, a local training pool and trying to help them persuade local authorities or schools or others to build a pool. So before going there, we'll talk about championship pools. So if you remember this one, this started all the craze for special event championship pools. These were the two pools that were built on Copacabana Beach in Rio, and FINA staged the World Short Course Championships. 10,000 people
Wow.
in an iconic venue watching. It was fantastic. And now that's kind of become a permanent requirement for special events.
Yeah, and that led us into this one.
That led us into this one, which was the US trials for the Athens Olympics. And a couple of water polo guys in California said, we'll host those trials so they can run some water polo events at the same time. No one ever expecting, again, 10,000 people watching an Olympic trials. More people watch this than watch the Olympic Games themselves live. So it was
incredible.
And then unparalleled at the time, it was an excellent event. And then we went to this. So this is Omaha. The Olympic trials for the US Olympic team, 14,000 people per session.
And I know, yeah, Trevor, I know we mentioned this on the last session too, but it's such an interesting fact. I just wanted to chime in here that the Rio Olympic Games were 12,000 people venue, correct?
12,000 people, yeah, for the Olympic Games. So more people watching the trials than the Olympic Games themselves. But the stat that jumped out at me, right, was 14,000 people watching morning heats. And those people who've been to a swimming event know that morning heats are pretty much for the dedicated fan.
Yeah, so that's an impressive number, you're right.
So let's go on to today's topics.
Yeah, so today's guest, we have Scott Hester, the president of Councilman Hansacker in the US, Ruth Pujol and Philippe Sadowski from Studio Pujol Sadowski in Barcelona, Spain, and also Clément Manchon from Chaban Architecture in France. So again, in true Myrtha style, a very nice, diverse group. Today we'll start the session with Ruth and Philippe from Studio Pujol Sadowski, excuse me. And this is an interesting group because they were very important, they played a very important role with the development with FINA, along with FINA, of the World Championships. Correct, Trevor?
Correct. And let me just talk about Pujol Sadowski architecture first. I mean, do we have the next slide? I think this is really the background. Kim Pujol was the founder of Pujol Architects, and he's still, of course, fully involved with the company now. But there's no architect in the world with more experience of championship pools than Joachim Pujol. It's been involved in the design of many of the recent World Championship facilities like Baku Aquatic Palace, Rio Olympic Pool, the Danube Arena in Budapest, where the ISL are currently holding their 2020 event. So a company with tremendous experience.
Yeah, and we're fortunate today to have Ruth and Philippe join us. I'm going to bring them into the conversation. Hi, guys. Thank you for taking part.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Good afternoon.
So as we mentioned earlier, they've been involved very closely with developing the new facility regulations and also this booklet of Pools for All. So it's over to you guys. Tell us all about it.
Okay, well, so thanks for our introduction. of our company. In fact, I was going to introduce, but I would say you have already done it. Related to the topic that you has proposed us to talk about on how to use the new FINA rules and the pool certification for 50-meter pools, Philip Sadowski, my associate, will develop this topic following to me. But before, we would like to introduce you how we approach the design of 50-meter pools. From our experience of aquatic facilities, we have checked that the information provided by FINA handbook is essential but not sufficient for properly guide in the design of aquatic centers. So the compliance of FINA rules are necessary requirements to properly develop the sport practice. However, the swimming pool by itself is not enough to fulfill all requirements to carry out a competition. So, prior to the design of a swimming pool, it must be established what is the purpose of the aquatic center and what is the use, what will be the use. And in case of hosting competitions, how the building will adjust from the daily use to the competition mode. So depending on the competition level, national, continental, or international competitions, and depending on the swimming disciplines that will compete in that swimming pools, the facility shall accommodate a certain capacity of spectators. So once these parameters are established, the design of pools will respond, the design of the pool itself will respond to the needs and the requirements of the competition and its daily use. So in addition of the pool, the building must, or the facility must foresee several operational programs linked to the competition. Part of this operational program will be adjacent to the pool deck and other spaces located within the building, depending on the operational flows of the competition. So it's therefore very important to foresee in the design phase how the two uses of the facility, daily use and competition use, will be adjusted for their proper operation and optimization of the spaces.
Okay.
These two diagrams that I have shown you, the first is the daily use mode, and the second one, the one we're watching now, competition mode, are showing how an aquatic center is transformed by its daily use to a competition mode. So where it's appreciated how the competition program implies considerable increase in the area of the daily program. So with the exhaustive knowledge of the competition operations, we can work with some strategies to optimize the competition spaces, share with existing rooms, and at the same time providing temporary and rooms and temporary stands that will be integrated into the building without modifying its operation.
Okay.
So next slides, I will give the word to Philip Sadowski, who will develop the use of FINA rules and the certification of the pools.
Sorry, Philippe, I think that you might be muted.
Yeah, I mute my microphone. So the thing is, what I'm going to explain now is the pool itself and how it's affected by the FINA facility rule. Because before Ruth explained that to have a competition is needed the pool, obviously, but all the areas around it. And now the part which I am going to explain is just focused on the pool tank itself, and mainly focused on the 50 meter, which is the topic of today. So the first thing we have to understand in the FINA facility rule that there are three different categories. So there is a FINA Olympic standard pool, which is the rule for all the World Championship and Olympic Games. This means that all the pools in which the Olympics will be held, or World Champion has to fulfill this requirement. Then we have other FINA events, which are the rules affected with the FINA General Standard. And in this competition, actually, exactly the same requirements has to be followed for the World Championships and Olympics. But in this case, some of the requirements can be waived by the Bureau. And then we have the rest of the pools, in which the competitions are held following the FINA rules. So we have these three kind of level of competitions, and depending the level of competition that you are focused to build your facility, you have to follow one or another one. So this is very important because sometimes the people are asking for following the Olympic standard in a pool with no spectator at all, or maybe with 200 or 300 spectators. So this means that, okay, you can build it for practicing and for multi-purposes, but probably it doesn't make sense to follow all the parameters if you will never held an Olympics or a World Championship in this venue, and not even a FINA event.
Yeah.
So this is probably one of the key points that when you decide to build a 50-meter pool, you have to consider. And then obviously we have the FINA rule, facility rule, describes all the requirements for the different aquatic disciplines, which currently are the swimming, diving, water polo, artistic swimming, and high diving. Currently, we don't have any rules in the open water. So FINA doesn't have any rules in the open waters, but all the other rules has to be following the competition that you want to organize. And in this case, if we are talking about the 50-meter pool, obviously we can just organize swimming, artistic swimming, and water polo. The diving is required on all the different pools. So if we are going to focus on the changes of the facility rules from the previous ones, mainly actually the changes are not real changes. So because the main change or modification is probably the wording in order to improve the understanding of the rule, because some of the rules are confusing, and the aim of the changes are to improve this understanding. Then there is other additional rules which has been added, or to consider the construction tolerances, and also additional technical requirements. For example, in the case of the lane ropes, in which has been added the requirements to the lane rope itself. And obviously, there are some correction of typos and little mistakes that all the rules and all the books have. So if we go directly to the swimming facility rules, which is probably the main sport which everybody thinks when thinks in a 50-meter pool, but we have to not forget that there are other sports which can be held in a 50-meter pool. But obviously the rules, the major changes on the last review was in swimming, and in this case the change of the dimensional tolerance. Actually, the rule says exactly the same, but in other words. And now, if we think it's more clear and more easy to understand the previous rule. Then we have, in the case of the walls and the verticality, it has been added tolerance in the verticality of the angle, which before it was just said that the wall has to be vertical, 90 degrees. But we know when we build facilities, some construction tolerance has to be considered. And then when we go to the lane ropes, some technical requirements, additional requirements has been established. In the case of water conditions, in the previous rules, it was just set the temperature, and now it also has been established the water movement requirements. Because of the turbulence test, it was sometimes there are some problems during competition that some athletes complain about the turbulences, and for this reason, clear tests have been established to define that it's not real turbulence, not in lane 0, not in lane 9. So actually all the athletes have the same conditions during the competition. And obviously also the salinity of the water, which is the actually is one rule which was already written in the swimming rules, but now also has been added to the facility rule. And if we move to the next diagram, and probably the only real change which has been added in this last revision was the lane 0 and 9, and the new rules says that the lane 0 and 9 can be a little bit narrower. So instead of 2.5 can be 2.4 meters in order to fit in a 25-meter pool. This rule only can be applied in a permanent facility.
Okay.
And now if we focus to the FINA certificate, actually the FINA certificate, the only aim is to check that all the FINA rules are followed. And then we have actually two certificates. One is the certificate for Olympic Games and World Championship, which is directly reviewed by the FINA Facilities Committee, and is mandatory for all the Olympic and World Championship venues. Okay. And then we have the certificate guide, which, as the word says, is just a guide for the federation who wants to follow this rule. Because some federations, for example, in US, they have their own certificate form, so they can follow their own certificate. But if they want, or if they don't have any certificate, they can follow this guide for those federations who don't have any certification. And who participates in this process? Obviously, it has to be an independent surveyor, not a surveyor from the construction company, and not representing any interest of the client. An independent pool expert, so who will guide this surveyor, which parameters have to be checked, and a member of the federation who actually certifies the process. And then this is how the form looks. So we can see there are in the upper part, it's always described the rule which has to be followed. It's exactly the same text as in the FINA facility rules. And then in the lower part, it's fill in blank, where just the real dimensions on site has to be. So the surveyor takes this dimension, and then the pool expert fills in the form. And
great.
That's it.
Philippe, that's excellent. I'd just like to say that anybody looking in and having questions, all of these forms and the rules are on the FINA website and very clearly defined. Just make sure you get the latest rule when you're downloading, because they have all the different versions on the website. You want to make sure it's the latest one. And also, we didn't talk here about Pools for All very much. We sent some illustrations from the Pool for All booklet, but that's a fantastic booklet that will be very helpful to many architects and people who want to build a community or a championship pool. So please make sure you look at those. Philippe, can I ask one question? Is that the rule for the FINA rules for certification really only apply for pools that are going to hold competition between nations? Is that correct?
No, the certificate can be followed, but anybody who wants to certificate the pool. So
anyone,
exactly. So, but the thing is, if you want then to hold some FINA competition, a certificate is needed. So the certificate can be the one which the federation currently already have, if they have, and if they don't have, so then they have to follow the guide.
Okay.
So the guide is not mandatory. In the case that the federation, they have their own certificate. But obviously, this certificate has to have a minimum standard. So they check the main parameters of the FINA facility rules. For example, the length, the width, and the depth, and all this stuff.
But certainly, if anyone's planning to build a facility for championships that therefore will be swimmers from different nations, we really want to encourage them to use the FINA certificate, I believe, don't we?
I think so, because actually it's the FINA one is just following the FINA rules. So it just checks that the FINA rules are followed.
And then they are safe on certification and record and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Great. And Ruth and Philippe, if you don't mind, we'd ask that you stay on the line just quickly as we bring in Scott Hester from Councilman Hansacker. I think he'd like to pose a question or two. So welcome, Scott.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And Ruth and Philip, thank you for detailing those requirements. I do have just a couple of quick questions. One, let's start with the certification process. So, Philip, do you know, does FINA require that certification to occur prior to every championship event, or once the pool is certified and on file, is that kind of a legacy certification?
So the pool it has to be, the certificate has to be done before the competition, but it's better if, before the opening the opening of the building. So once the construction is finished, is to proceed with the certificate. So in our experience, in the ones we have participated, it was normally before the opening of the building. Okay,
thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that. And you had mentioned those who are involved in that certification process, and obviously FINA is part of that. Is their role simply to review the submitted certification, or is there an official from FINA that is requested to actually be on site during the certification process?
So it depends on which type of certificate we are going to do. So, for example, in the case of the World Championship and Olympics, the FINA Facilities Committee sent a member to do this process. So then it needs to be independent surveyor on site, and then it can be or a pool expert who will check everything and guide the surveyor, and then the member from FINA, or the FINA member can be the pool expert. So it can be both situations. It is in the case of World Championship and Olympic Games. In the case of a normal pool, which just for a local competition or maybe in the future for international competition, but they want to have this FINA certificate, then they have, again, the same situation. Independent surveyor, then they have to appoint a pool expert who understands the FINA rules and guide the surveyor, and then the FINA, the federation member, who actually is the person who certifies the process. Because we have to remember that in the FINA rules, it is said that the local federation is the representative of FINA in the country. So they have inside their obligation, one of these obligations is to certify the pool.
Okay. Thank you. And then just one other quick question kind of regarding the difference between the Olympic venues and World Championships. And you had outlined it, so perhaps you've already reviewed this in detail, but I just would like to clarify. So the Olympic requirement obviously is for the 10-lane pool with a 2.5, 2.5 meter wide lane width. And so there's a difference from that in the World Championships that has the 10-lane pool with the interior 8 lanes are the 2.5 meter width, but then there is a varying width on the 2 outside lanes. That allows for the buffer lanes, if you will, on the outsides of those lanes. So ultimately, is the overall dimension or width of the pool at 25 meters for both, obviously, Olympic game facilities as well as World Championships? Or does the World Championship venue actually, that pool becomes slightly wider than 25 meters?
So the first thing we have to remember that Olympics is an 8-lane event. So this means that because the general rule says that all the lanes must be 2.5 meter wide, and then at least 2 spaces of 0.2 meters outside of the lane, right? So if we take an Olympic pool, we have 8 lanes, and then these 2 spaces are 2.5 meters. But correct. In the 0.9, nobody is swimming nowadays, because everything depends on the number of athletes which are swimming. In the case of the World Championship, which is the main difference, is the number of athletes that are swimming. So to reduce the number of heats, they normally the heats are 10 lanes, and just the semifinals and finals are 8 lanes. So for this reason, because of the number of athletes, the World Championship is always a 10-lane event. So then, if we focus on the World Championship, we have two scenarios. The temporary facility, which is the last ones, are always temporary. For example, Barcelona, well, the case of Budapest was 35. But if the pool is temporary, so then it must be 26 meter wide. So 10 lanes of 2.5 and half a meter from each side. In the case of the pool is permanent, for example, the case of Budapest, then the lane 0 and 9 can be 2.4 meter, and the spaces will be just 0.9. So this is an exception of the general rule, and it is written in the rule for Olympic Games and World Championships.
Okay, I really appreciate you clarifying that. So essentially, there's a difference on the requirement whether the pool is considered a kind of a permanent legacy situation or temporary.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
So because we have to understand that in general, all the events are 8-lane events.
Right.
Except the only one which currently is the World Championship, which is a 10-lane event. Because this is just because of the number of athletes, the heats, and the timetables of the competition.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that.
Welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Philippe.
Thank you.
I think this is going to be a reoccurring theme throughout the discussion because I think Ruth said it well. When you're designing a facility, there are several variables that you have to consider, but we're saying the crowd and the competition are perhaps the two main variables when we're talking about championship pools. And we didn't introduce Scott, but Scott is from Councilman Hunsaker, of course, and these are world famous in terms of championship pools. They've got an unbeatable record in the USA for building NC2A championship pools, but that's not their only business. They're also in municipal, resort, high-rise, just anybody who wants water. So today we're concentrating on championship pools, and I know very well the Toronto pool, which is just down the road from me, Scott, and you were definitely involved in that championship pool, and perhaps you can take us through that and some other parts of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. So on the screen here, you see a beautiful image of the 3 centerline 10-meter tower for the Pan American Games venue, now called the Toronto Aquatic Center from a legacy standpoint. This facility actually was built with 2 50-meter pools and a permanent installation. The technical solution for the pool tanks themselves actually were Myrtha tanks. And so that even though those are a permanent situation, is a great example of applying the Myrtha technology to a legacy permanent installation. And so the interesting thing is building that facility with 2 permanent 50-meter pools certainly puts it in unique territory in North America. Certainly, there are probably approximately around 10 facilities in North America that have 2 50-meter pools installed within the same general location, and that's pretty rare. There are certainly a host of others where they have access to that second pool, but it's not necessarily considered at the same venue as those 10 facilities. So it's quite unique, very unique actually, to build 2 permanent 50-meter pool installations. If this were a World Championship or an Olympic venue, or even in the case of Toronto, there certainly could have been a consideration to building one of those tanks, or what's called the non-main championship course, in a temporary installation, similar to the approach that, Paris is going to take. So, Lane, if you want to go on to the next slide here. Again, another excellent photo here of the 2015 Pan American Games. Interesting thing about this venue, and we'll talk about spectator seating here in just a second, but you'll see here on the left, this picture is actually the games situation, the games layout. from a legacy standpoint, the spectator seating that you see on the left of the screen is not still there. That was a temporary wall on the outside of the natatorium that they actually removed post games and moved that wall inward and removed a significant portion of those spectator seats, because for the games they were near 10,000 spectators for the actual event. They've since reduced that to around 2,500 spectators. So it's a significant reduction, because reality is, as we all know, a natatorium is a significantly sized space. It has high volume, and it has challenging conditioning requirements, such as HVAC, humidification, and to operate that in a legacy situation would be very costly. It really would not be very sustainable for the owner. So therefore, this is a great example of how they did build something for a game situation and then reduce that to a facility that's more manageable from a legacy standpoint. And if you want to go on to the next screen here, so this one is an example of an outdoor facility. So this is one of those approximate 10 venues in North America. This is actually Stanford University. Building these outdoors, though, you have the cost reduction, obviously, of not building walls around this pool and conditioning the space. But this is an example of kind of that rare class of 250-year permanent installation. So again, it is pretty rare to have that done, and it's typically not approached that way. So if you are talking about a world-class competition venue, there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration, even beyond the pools themselves. So if we had more time, I'd love to spend an hour probably on every one of these topics, but obviously we don't today, but I'm happy to have that conversation down the road if somebody would like to do it. But everything from the natatorium environment to the layout of the space, egress of the athletes in and around the space, timing system rooms, judges, timers, spectator location, all of those things go into play in, designing and laying out what I would call a world-class competitive venue. Even things like water depths and water temperatures, those are, by the way, the two most significant differences of the user groups in aquatics, water depths and water temperatures. Obviously, for aquatic sports, there's some very specific requirements for water depths, but when you start bringing in all the other users from the legacy standpoint, there's other considerations that need to take place. The pool configuration, no doubt, all the race course layouts, the field of plays, critically important. The pool structure, everything from the pool overflow to the construction of the actual pool itself. The tolerances we talked about earlier are pretty minimal, right? And so one of the advantages of the Myrtha technology is the ability to kind of really hone in and ensure that we're meeting that tolerance requirement for field of play layouts. And then lastly, things like the water quality, filtration, treatment, and obviously having a pool that's extremely quiet and really elimination of current. So I just wanted to mention that there's a lot that goes into the design of world-class competition venue, even beyond the pools themselves. So I mentioned aquatic users. Generally, we put them into 4 groups. We've talked a lot about aquatic sports or competition, but there are other users, obviously, recreation, instructional, wellness, and therapy. And one of the things that we're typically tasked with is how do we design a facility that can meet the need of that aquatic sport user, but also ensure that we have the ability to accommodate all those other user groups. And if you want to move on to the next slide, Lanny, this is an example of what a typical kind of revenue generation is. And so you'll see that the highest revenue generation typically is kind of that everyday user or that recreational user. And these are, of course, facilities that have a legacy standpoint. Obviously, if we're talking about temporary installations, Olympic venues, the priority is first and foremost to accommodate that situation. But for most facilities, it goes beyond that. There's a legacy, approach. The facility has to be sustainable. So we have to take into consideration, how do we accommodate those other users? So then I mentioned earlier, it's everything from considering water depths, even water temperatures in the future, to even other amenities that can be brought in to accommodate the various users. I'm often asked about spectator seating, so I believe we saw Ruth and Philip give some examples of spectator seat counts for World Championship and Olympic Games. I just pulled out kind of the United States perspective, and this really probably goes for all of North America. So in most cases, we're talking about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 spectators. For most, I would call not necessarily world-class or certainly Olympic venues, but national events, very large regional events. Typically, that's the spectator seat count that we have. If you want to go to the next slide, Lanny, I think I broke it down into even what I'll call the non-traditional or non-national or championship events. So local meets. So that's high school, dual meets. You're typically talking about 150 to 200 spectators. And generally speaking, we see those located at deck level. So accessibility is really typically not a concern. The challenge there is you've got athletes, you've got spectators on the same level, on the same space. And so there's some considerations we have to take into when we talk about control. When we move on up to what I'll call more area meets, again, this is the high school or club level. This is when we might have multiple teams beyond maybe just 2 or 3. You might have 8 or 10. You might have 500 athletes over a weekend. Now you're talking about 250 to 500 spectator seats. And that might be in a balcony or a mezzanine type situation. The advantage of that is you not necessarily have to have elevator access. And so it eliminates some of the accessibility requirements as compared to when you move on up to larger regional meets. These are like state championships or large invitationals. Now you're talking about concourse, second story seating, spectators accounts, well beyond 500, in some cases maybe approaching 1,000. And then the challenge with that, or the thing to take into consideration, is now you have to meet full accessibility requirements, and generally that requires an elevator, and now you're adding additional costs. So that's just a real quick example of what kind of the range of spectator seating you might see that's not a championship or an Olympic venue. So I think we've already seen this slide once today. So this is a great example of what a facility looks like where you have a temporary pool installation. And so, one of the things that I think that Trevor and Lanny asked me is, what are my thoughts on the trends for accommodating, World Championship and Olympic events, and whether or not these pools should be temporary or permanent. And, obviously the advantage of having a temporary installation is the obvious, is it's not there permanently. The downside is also the obvious, is it's not there permanently and you don't have a legacy use for it. So, how do you find that perfect mix of having kind of both a legacy versus, something that accommodates the kind of in the moment situation? Obviously here in the United States, the Olympic trials for the last, is it 4 Olympic trials now, Trevor?
Yes.
It's been a temporary installation, and I think everyone in the U.S. and USA Swimming would agree that this has been a fantastic solution. They've been able to go into an arena or a venue that traditionally is not necessarily accommodating swimming, whether it be basketball or other concerts or events, and you can install that temporary installation and have all those spectator seats. Because as I've outlined, and as Ruth and Philip outlined, one of the biggest challenges to hosting this level of event is how do you accommodate all the spectators? So I think it's a fantastic solution. Again, the thing to think about though is the venue intended to have a legacy purpose? And typically for Olympic venues, kind of having that ongoing legacy perspective is pretty important. Yes, first and foremost, how do we accommodate the Olympic Games? But secondarily, and quite honestly, probably just as important is how does that host city, operate that facility from a sustainable perspective. So, if you move on to the next slide, Lanny, the example that I've got here on the screen are just a couple images that Trevor shared with me of the 2024 Paris facility. And that will have 2 50-meter pools, of course, but only one will be a permanent installation. The second pool will accommodate, will be a temporary installation. So you're still meeting the Olympic game FINA requirement to have those 2 50-meter pools, but this will be a much more reasonable, sustainable, long-term approach for Paris and to operate this facility, because the burden of, not necessarily operating from a program standpoint, but it's really about the kind of utility cost that's involved with enclosing permanently 2 large bodies, like I showed you in the Toronto game. So I think it's actually a brilliant approach. I know there's some discussion and some back and forth about, is that really meeting the requirement, is it not? But I think really when you look at the holistic perspective and look again I keep using the word sustainable, that is really an excellent approach that I think Paris is taking.
Excellent.
And then one of the last questions you asked me to just touch upon is kind of my feeling on the FINA regulations, and even specific to how those certifications and regulations are met, whether it be a permanent installation done through a construction method of concrete, or terminology we use a lot of times of shotcrete or gunite, or a more modular system like the Myrtha system. And obviously, there are some very specific dimensional requirements that have to be met. And, there's no doubt when you're constructing a pool that is done through more means and methods, like concrete construction, the cost or the opportunity to not meet those tolerances generally do go up. Now, if you have a qualified contractor, someone that's highly experienced, we've seen lots of maybe not world-class events, but I'll call kind of world-class championship-style facilities built through concrete. But it certainly becomes a little more challenging. And the advantage that the Myrtha installation does offer is you really eliminate a lot of the error that can occur, because obviously the cost of failure is pretty high. A pool that's too short may be a fast pool, but it's too short, right? And so we've got to meet those certifications. And so that's something to keep in mind for the audience out there, that if you are thinking about constructing a pool, and it doesn't have to necessarily be world-class competition, but if the intended use of this is going to be for aquatic sports competition use, it's something to think about when you're choosing that methodology of delivering the project. So if there are any questions that Lanny or Trevor you have for me, I'm happy to answer them, but hopefully that gives you a kind of a quick overview of topics ranging from, multiple 50-meter pools to, methodology on construction.
No, I give it an A+ for the presentation. Thank you. It was very clear and touched on everything we would have asked you. So thanks for being one step ahead.
Yep.
Very good. My only point was I know how difficult it is for us with our technology to meet the FINA regulations or the regulations on a pool. I know with poured and formed concrete, it's perhaps not easy, but it's easier than shotcrete.
More difficult. You definitely increase the chance for error. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You're really relying on the ability of that contractor to get it right. And so, and that can be a risky proposition sometimes, particularly talking about world-class type facilities.
I would say they're all saying, thank goodness we don't have to fill out that form when we
Yeah.
Listen, Scott, thank you very much. That was excellent. Enjoyed it.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay. And for our third guest of the day, we have Clément Mansion of Chaban in France, who is no stranger to Myrtha webinars. I'll add him into the conversation.
Hello.
Hi, Clément. So today you'll be giving us a bit of an overview on a presentation of a facility in Bordeaux. Bordeaux, I have to mention it, I'm sorry, but very well known for the wine, correct?
Yeah, Bordeaux. Don't imagine a pool filled with wine. It's just a pool located in Bordeaux.
It sounds like a dream. I might have to pick up swimming again if that's the case.
Not for international competition.
Yes, and you've talked to our India team before on this topic, and we just had to have you come back because it was a very interesting facility, and it ties in very well with our conversation today. Because this is a state-of-the-art aquatic complex, and we'll share a video shortly as you kind of give us the overview. But it will satisfy both stringent environmental standards as well as a competitive aquatic facility. So can you give us a bit of an overview on this one?
Okay, so Here is a small movie that shows the facility. It's already set in a big park in Mérignac, so close to Bordeaux. And there is many other sport facilities on this site. So what you can see here is the entrance. This giant horizontal window has to show that there is a swimming pool there. So you have to guess through that windows that there is the bleachers, the grandstands, and the pool behind. So the lobby is like a gallery, but instead of art, it's a swimming pool, but it's very close to art. So this is the main pool, the Olympic pool size, 50 meters long. But our main purpose was to have a multi-use facility. So you can also use it for leisure and for movies and for many activities. And we did that through a movable bulkhead and movable floors, adding a restaurant on top of the bleachers. So it can be used like a VIP lodge when there is a competition. Here you can see the outdoor swimming pool where the athletes are going to warm up before the competition. But during the rest of the year, you can also go there and have fun. There's a 55 meters long slide and many water games for kids inside and outside. So it's very multi-use facility. This is the more calm area where people rest on the south terrace because a pool is linked to the sun very closely. You don't go to the beach when there is no sunshine, so the two work well together. So this is more like the spa area, and on top of it there is really a wellness center with the fitness or like dry activities and the wellness, the spa with hammam and saunas and big outdoor space. And you can just jump into a jacuzzi and look at the rugby stadium that's in front of it, and you can watch a rugby match while you're just enjoying yourself in the jacuzzi. You can also look at the water jumps, which is a unique feature in France. So you can jump from those slides with a bike or with a buoy or many. There's many things you can do with it, including scuba diving, because the pool is very deep. So our purpose was, as Scott said previously, leisure is like 75% of the income in the swimming pool. So we have a sport facility here, but we added a lot of leisure in order to make the expensive sports swimming pool less expensive to run over a course of 25 years. And that was the goal of this competition. It was not how much does this building cost, but how much does the running of the facility through 25 years of use will cost to the city of Bordeaux. And that's why we added things to the basic needs of the city, which were the basic needs of the city are to teach how to swim to children. And also they had some fairly good swimmers, so they wanted this Olympic size pool. But that's where the basic needs. And we added the restaurant, the water jump, the wellness center, and many things that makes it more valuable and in the long run less costly. But that's tomorrow's topic, so I won't go too far on it.
But I think it's a wonderful example of a championship type venue that looks at all the other aspects so that that isn't a white elephant after the fact. And I think you've done a wonderful job here, Clément. I'd like to quote something that you have on your website saying that our public facilities, they're significant investments for the local people and are only used 50% of their capacity. So your company designs spaces to accommodate different audiences at different times with different uses. And we see this here in the presentation. It's excellent.
That's right. Because the more users you add to a project, the more it'll be used. Actually, the more people will go in there, and it's very much true for a swimming pool. It's not just about durable or adding some photovoltaic panels on the roof, or here we have like 30% of the energy with a heat pump on the ground, geothermal energy. We have a wood boiler that's also warming up the whole urban area. But it's not just about that. It's an investment for the city, so they have to have a maximum of people enjoying it, because that's the goal of it. Teaching how to swim and how to enjoy water in the end. And when you enjoy water, you learn to swim faster and you swim better.
Yes.
I think many of the listeners probably they know Bordeaux for the wine, but they don't probably know that it's now one of the most progressive cities in France for green living, and that was part of your whole presentation. You had to reach the standards that Bordeaux needed in terms of the green factor. Is that correct?
That's correct. Well, first, it's a great location because it's only 2 hours from Paris with the fast train, TGV. And then they are on the west coast, like half an hour to the Atlantic. So nice place to be, a nice climate. They have nice wine, of course. It's a beautiful city. And they're expanding fast. It's a very thriving city with very good dynamics. And they want this growing. They want to control that growing, so they can have a nice and natural and healthy environment for their children. So they asked us to think about a swimming pool with low energy requirements.
Perfect.
Yes, thank you again for a super presentation, and we're looking forward to the invite for the opening.
I was going to, Trevor, you took the words right out of my mouth. No pressure.
It's Manchester lose tonight.
Thank you for the presentation, and thanks for sharing with us.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Okay, Trevor, now staying local to France, Paris 2024. Should we chat briefly about this one?
Well, yes. I mean, this is a shot of the Paris pool. The architectural team for this were actually a Dutch architect, Van Hoven, working with Antilles, with an extensive range of consultants to win this competition. And it's, believe it or not, it's the only building that will be built for the Olympic Games. And it includes a new pedestrian bridge that links it to the Stade de France across the roadway. So it's quite an interesting project. If we go to the next slide. So it's designed just like Clermont's for multi-purpose use. And during the games, it's a competition pool for water polo, diving, and synchronized swimming. The building also, after the competition for the Paralympics, will be used as a Boccia stadium. So they're really making full use of the building.
Yeah.
What people should be asking is, so what about swimming? Because swimming is not actually being held in this building. The building is a stretch 50-meter pool with double bulkheads. It's got a movable floor, thermal bulkhead, all of the things that Clement was talking about in his pool. It also has a split bulkhead that allows long course and short course. Right, so it's a crazy building. And the swimming events will take place in a temporary venue, initially it was planned to have something like Rio, but when they were cutting back with expenses only recently, probably 2 or 3 months ago, they scrapped that idea, and now they're putting the venue much similar to the US trials in a purpose arena that's made for multi event use. So we're yet to know where that's going to be going, but certainly, as Scott was saying, that seems a sensible approach nowadays.
Yeah.
You host an Olympic Games. Other people would disagree and think that it's an opportunity for building a multi-million-dollar facility. But when you think that London cost $500 million and then they had to give it away for £1, and then, you know, you've got the Tokyo facility that, you know, is built again to host 15,000 people. But after that, how many events will have 15,000 people? So
yeah, it's kind of a one in a lifetime type of thing. Yeah.
Big decision. And it's a decision, I think, why we see many World Championship venues going temporary nowadays.
Yeah.
Because the ongoing expense of looking after something like that is very difficult.
Very costly, yeah.
We like to blow our own trumpet a little, and thanks to some of the presenters for mentioning Myrtha, but many of the features that we see in the Paris pool were a copy of the features we see in this pool called Windsor in Canada, that was built a few years back. It's a stretch 50-meter pool, diving at the far end. This near end has a movable floor. And a split bulkhead, and not a split bulkhead, sorry, a thermal bulkhead, which means that in the shallow area of the pool, when you move the floor up, you can have warmer temperatures than in the regular use of the pool. So that was a first from Myrtha, and the split bulkhead is a first from Myrtha, and we're very proud of the fact that it's now going to be used in the Olympic venue in Paris.
Yeah.
This venue also, Lani, you've not been there, but it has this fabulous water park as well attached to the building. And so it's catering to all those uses, very similar to Clermont. And of course, this helps the running costs of the building down the road. So yeah, super facility. We're glad to see Paris has copied a few of these. This was designed by a Canadian architect or American architect, WTI, who will join us tomorrow for the multi-use
discussion
of the 50-meter presentation. So I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was an interesting group today. We had a few great presenters today, and to touch on the competitive world, I guess the 50 meters in the competitive world of things. And tomorrow we'll have a nice continuation going in the direction of more community purposes, 50 meters tying into community purposes.
Yes, and you know, I'm sorry I wasn't there to nudge and push you, Lani, because it makes it much easier on the presentation when we're in the same room, but we survived. Hope everyone else did out there.
Yes, and not much we can do amidst the pandemic, unfortunately, but.
Okay, well, stay safe. I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, and hopefully we'll see all the viewers tomorrow as well. Thank you, Trevor.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.